Da 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 da. Welcome back to disenFRIENDSchised, the podcast where we use cinema therapy to identify disenfranchised grief through the lens of friends. I'm Karen Belinsky Mathison, host of this podcast and creator of The Naked Grief. So, before we get too deep into this, I mentioned that we use cinema therapy to identify disenfranchised grief. Well, cinema therapy is actually part of the topic for this week's episode. This episode is episode 20 for season 2, the one where Old Yeller dies. It's the ultimate case study of cinema therapy because Phoebe is about to experience the dark side of cinema therapy firsthand when she realizes that her mom was rewriting movie endings to protect her and her sister. So buckle up, because today we are talking about doggy snuff films, the big book of children's names, and why telling your kids that the dog has babies instead of rabies is a recipe for a psychological crash landing. We're diving into the deep end of shielded childhoods, curated realities, and the frantic anxiety of missing out on a child's milestones. So, in this episode, the gang gathers to watch Old Yeller, only for Phoebe to realize her entire childhood was curated by a lie. And not just one lie. Her mom didn't simply change Old Yeller's ending once. She created a whole protected little reality for Phoebe and Ursula. She turned off the TV at the happy part and invent a cheerful ending. Like she could keep the world's cruelty outside the apartment if she got there fast enough with a remote and a smile. That was her version of love. Edit the pain, soften the blow, keep the girls innocent. How often have we wanted to soften the blow of our own realities? Because sometimes life is just hard and you want to sugarcoat it. Doesn't always work. In my circles, I've talked about a couple that I knew who had lost a pet and decided that it was easier for them to tell their kids that their dog was still at the vet. And a year later, when their second dog died, I watched these kids learn that they now needed to grieve their previous dog as well. Sometimes sugarcoating doesn't always work. I remember when I would take my youngest to the park shortly after we lost his father, and he would go up to strangers' kids and say, "I don't have a dad anymore, he's dead." And I would feel my heart just fall to the floor, and I'd want to just run over to him and embrace him in the biggest hug and protect him and say, "Oh, that's not true, you'll see daddy." And like, you want to say whatever it is that's going to make things better. But sometimes the reality is things don't get better. We just have to learn how to move through it. And sometimes sheltering and trying to protect can actually do maybe even more harm. Just saying. But cinema therapy is also good because in this case, with these Friends episodes, we can identify through their characters our own life experiences that make it a little less of a slap in the face of reality, because it's done with humor. So, as we move on, the gut punch for Phoebe was that after her mom sugarcoated all these happy endings and reinvented them, she killed herself. So all of that sugarcoating and all of those Band-Aid happy endings came crashing down anyway. So now Phoebe is left grieving on multiple levels. She's grieving her mom. She's grieving the truth that her mom never trusted her to handle. She's grieving the collapse of a reality she thought was real. And in true Friends fashion, this one movie ending opens the floodgates to everything else. The lies about movies, the lies about her father, the whole photo model identity crisis, the layers and layers of family deceit that have shaped Phoebe's life. You know, Phoebe can be a little flighty and a little out there, but really, with everything that she's dealt with, she's one of the most positive characters that we've ever seen. And as I'm going through my own grief journey, Phoebe has kind of become like my idol, my role model, because she knows how to act like a duck. She lets that stuff just roll off of her. It holds her for a minute, and then she learns how to pivot and move through it. And she does it with grace and sometimes humor, but she's outstanding. She really is. And she finds wise, not wise like W-I-S-E, but wise like W-H-Y-S, about everything. There's a reason. She figures out a reason for whatever it is that she's going through or was exposed to. And when we're in the heart of our own journey, sometimes being able to take a pause and find our why and be wise about it could be beneficial. Just saying. So then meanwhile, Richard is trying to be one of the guys with Joey and Chandler. He's got the Jag. He's smoking cigars. He's got the cool mustache. Chandler's trying to even grow a mustache out. Joey's walking around with a cigar hanging out of his mouth, trying to be all suave. But the fun comes to a screeching halt when Joey accidentally reveals that him and Chandler view Richard more as a dad than a buddy. And Richard is left feeling the sting of his own aging, a classic case of identity displacement. Fortunately, it doesn't impact his relationship with Monica, so that's a plus. And here's the other thing. I'm on a lot of friends pages on social media, and this season with Monica and Richard, there's a lot of people still going, I don't know how I ever felt about that. I remember being in my 20s thinking, a little bit cringy, just because if I dated somebody that was my dad's age, I knew how my parents would react. Or at least I thought I knew. But when you watch a relationship that actually works, age really kind of goes out the window. And the older I get, the more like the age doesn't really matter, because connection's so important and dating is hard. In the last 8 years, I've dated 3 people. I've been on several dates, but I've seriously dated 3 people, and only one was really worth my time and effort. And finding the right person, age, I don't think should really make a difference. That's just me. So then we have Ross. Poor Ross. Neurotic Ross. He's having a full-blown crisis again. It happens a lot with him. This time it's over Ben's milestones, because he keeps missing all the firsts. He thinks it's exciting because Ben pulls himself up. He thinks it's for the first time, only to find out, no, he's been doing that for over a week. Oh. Okay, well, he waved. Well, no, he's been doing that for a while too. Okay, well, so every time he does something, he's learning that he's seeing it second and third time after. And it's breaking him. So Ross wants to be around him more. He wants to have opportunities to see some of these firsts. And Ross panics and demands a whole weekend just to witness some of these. Anxiety manifests in future casting, where he tells Rachel about the life he's already planned for her. How they're going to spend their family years in Scarsdale with 2 kids. Emily, of all things. That he pulled right out of the big book of names. So crazy, right? And then we've got the characters in grief. Phoebe is dealing with shielded grief. She's effectively re-grieving her childhood innocence after realizing her support system, her mother, prioritized comfort over truth, and the protection itself was built on deception. Ross suffering from secondary parent grief. He's feeling the milestone FOMO, fear of missing out, that hits non-custodial parents or working parents who feel they are losing the race of connection. Even those of us that were a two-parent couple, if you're utilizing daycare, you're always afraid that the daycare is going to see these firsts. And even if it is, you don't want to know that they took their first step or made their first crawl or rolled over for the first time at daycare. You want to think when you first see it is the first time. It's your first time. So maybe that's the pivot. It's good to know that they're doing it, but it's not the first until it's my first. And then we've got Richard, who's navigating identity displacement grief. He's grieving the loss of his youthful peer status, and he's confronted with being the elder statesman of the group, and chooses to back out of hanging out with Joey and Chandler because of. So naming the disenfranchised grief. Why are these disenfranchised? Because society tells us that being upset about a movie ending is overreacting. We were told that missing a baby's first word is no big deal because they'll say it 1,000 more times. But these are real sharp pains that we often try and laugh off, but they're still real. Delayed reality trauma. This is what happens when the old yeller moments of life, the deaths, the failures, the harsh truths, are hidden from your well-meaning parents. When you finally hit those moments in adulthood, you aren't just grieving the event, you're grieving the fact that you weren't prepared for reality. It creates a cynical whiplash, which we see Phoebe displayed as she watches Sesame Street and warns Ben that Bert is gone, but I looked and he is coming back. It just takes a while, but they will see him again. I had to look first. That's when you've got to jump ahead to make sure that you're prepared for how things are going to unfold. Even in something as simple and as child innocent as Sesame Street. That's big. That speaks to her scars. Milestone envy. Ross's pain is a very specific type of unrecognized grief. For parents who don't live in the home 24/7 or who have a caregiver providing for their child 8 to 10 hours a day, every missed first is a reminder of the distance created by divorce, separation, or just a work schedule. It's the pain of being a visitor in your own child's life. When Rachel is the one to hear Ben's first word, Ross's reaction isn't, "Yay, Ben spoke!" It's, "I miss everything." That's a cry of grief, not jealousy. And we see that a lot with Ross. So again, with the cinema therapy thing, I hope you guys are keeping track, because really, even though Friends was equally spread out to address and identify with every character, when it comes to the disenfranchised grief, Ross is our big star. He really is. If he had dealt with things from episode 1, with Carol moving out, with the fact that she cheated, with the fact that she was now with someone new, the way Ross handles everything would look different. I don't know that he would be as upset about missing other things if he had learned how to move forward instead of trying to jump ahead too quickly and not address his own feelings. Not saying that he still wouldn't be having this fear of missing out and feeling disattached and wanting to work on different ways to be able to have Ben more frequently in his life. And then we have the inherited betrayal. This is the grief that shows up when a parent shields you for your own good, and the eventual discovery of truth feels like a betrayal of the entire relationship. Phoebe isn't just sad about Old Yeller. She's realizing her mom believed she was too fragile for reality. And the cruelest irony is that her mom couldn't even protect herself from her own pain. That's the tragedy of the happy ending approach to parenting. It teaches kids that pain is something to hide, not something to hold. And Phoebe went from having a relatively normal life to suddenly living on the streets, living out of a van with an albino guy who killed himself, and maybe understanding some of these sadder endings would have given her a little different way to navigate her own options. I feel like she went from one extreme to the other, and I don't know why she never lived with grandma until she was older. But regardless, maybe she ran away just to escape the pain. We never know, really, so we could guess all day long. I'd love to hear what your all's thoughts are. I mean, this show's 30 plus years old. It would be really good to know how everybody else is perceiving Phoebe's backstory. Maybe we can invent one. The analysis of friend support. How do the friends handle these heavy hits? As usual, it's a mix of humor and toxic positivity. When Phoebe is traumatized by the reality of cinema, Monica actually tries to use the right tool, another movie. But she uses it wrong. This is where cinema therapy really matters. Cinema therapy isn't about replacing one sad story with a happy one. It's about sitting in the sad story and finding meaning there. Monica hands Phoebe It's a Wonderful Life, which is exactly what Phoebe's mom would have done. Cover the pain with a more comforting narrative. She's literally recreating the shielding pattern. Phoebe's response is perfect. It should have been called It's a Sucky Life, and just when you think it can't suck anymore, it does. Phoebe didn't need a happy ending. She needed someone to say, yeah, that movie ending is brutal. Let's talk about why it hurts. On the other hand, the guy's support of Richard is actually quite sweet, even if it is misguided. They admire him so much that they try to be him, but they fail to see that by elevating him to a dad status, they are effectively pushing him out of their circle of peers. They aren't trying to hurt him, but they are inadvertently reminding him that he is a different age and in a different life stage, which is its own kind of isolation. Coaching moments and what-if scenarios. How to actually do cinema therapy. Here's the difference between what Phoebe's mom did and what we do with this podcast. Her mom used movies to avoid grief. We use TV to name grief. If a scene makes you cry, don't change the channel. Stay with it. Ask yourself, what is this scene touching in me? What loss does it remind me of? That's the work. That's cinema therapy. Identifying with a character or a situation and finding how it relates to you or someone you know and how they move through it, what may have worked better, and then applying whatever that looks like in your own world to see how it helps. And also feeling less alone, because when you see somebody else, especially on TV, struggling with something that you're struggling with, clearly you're not the only one, or writers for a TV show wouldn't make this a subject. So sometimes just feeling a little less alone makes us feel supported and seen. The Scarsdale reframe. When Ross starts planning 20 years into the future with Rachel, after only 6 weeks of dating, his Scarsdaling the relationship. This is a common trauma response. When we feel we have no control over the present, like Ross missing Ben's milestones, we try to grab control over the future. A coaching tip. If you find yourself future casting or obsessively planning, ask yourself, what am I grieving in the present that makes the future feel safer? Ross wasn't trying to suffocate Rachel. He was trying to ensure that he wouldn't miss the next family he built. Ironic, right? Because he still ends up not with his ideal situation. The what-if scenarios. What if Phoebe's mom had been honest? Just think about that for a second. What if she had been honest? If Phoebe had been allowed to mourn Old Yeller at the age of 6, she might have developed better coping mechanisms for the world's harshness. By shielding her, her mother actually left her more vulnerable to the cynical crash she experiences in this episode. And if Phoebe's mom had modeled vulnerability instead of perfection, she might have built a foundation strong enough to hold her own pain too. The happy ending lie didn't just hurt Phoebe. It isolated her mom in her own suffering, because if you're the one always creating the happy ending, where do you go when you can't find one for yourself? So also leaning into this a little bit more, since Old Yeller is a Disney movie, I remember before I had kids talking with existing moms, and they were like, yeah, I don't like Disney movies because there's always a death in them, and it just seems so sad. And that really resonated with me. And I was like, oh, mental note, when you have kids, maybe you don't want to show them things involving death. And then you start to realize it's actually really helpful. The play that was being put on at my son's middle school the month that my husband was fighting for his life in the hospital happened to be The Lion King. Irony-ish. Going to see that with him at his school to support his friends that were in the play was tough. Knowing that his dad might not make it, watching Simba react to the death of his father was hard. But learning that you can Hakuna Matata and find ways to worry less and focus in the now, and to find the little things that can make you still smile even when your heart's breaking, that's huge. You learn a lot in The Lion King. You learn a lot through a lot of the Disney movies. The fact that not giving up on your dreams, even if you're stuck scrubbing and cleaning behind your stepmother and stepsisters, or getting brutalized by your stepmother, the queen, or even in Cars, struggling with losing your mentor, or learning how to be humble enough to have a mentor. All of these things are important life experiences. And even in Monsters, Inc., how often are we afraid of something under the bed, or afraid of the dark, or afraid of just something? And learning how to laugh instead of scream, so clever. That's what cinema therapy is, folks. Shout out to all those great Disney movies, by the way. So back to the what ifs. What if Richard had embraced the dad role? Instead of feeling blue, Richard could have seen his status as a compliment. That he's the only one in the room who actually has his life together. Sometimes the grief of aging is just the fear that we've lost our cool, when in reality, we've gained a seat at a much more stable table. So, relatable life examples. We see these themes everywhere in our real lives. Have you ever had that Phoebe moment when you realized your parents handled a family crisis with toxic positivity? Maybe they told you a relative was away on vacation when they were actually in rehab or jail. or dead. When you find out the truth years later, the grief you feel isn't just for the person that you lost, it's for the trust you had in your own reality. And let's talk about helicopter parenting and curated childhoods for a second. If you grew up with a parent who protected you from the hard stuff, no funerals, no difficult conversations, no admissions of their own struggles, you might find yourself in your 20s or 30s feeling like Phoebe, suddenly realizing the world is darker than you were told, and grieving the trust you had in your own reality, not just the grief of whatever it is now. It's a domino effect. One falls and then they all fall, and you go from being a little sad to not knowing which end is up. That's huge. Or consider the working parent who misses the school play or the first steps, the milestone FOMOs. They're real. Society says at least you're providing, but your heart says I'm a secondary character in my own story. We need to start acknowledging that these small misses are actually significant losses. They chip away at our sense of belonging and our identity as parents, friends, and partners. At thenakedgrief.com, we recognize all of this. It's a safe place to explore all kinds of different avenues, whether it's clicking on a free ebook or just checking out the Daily Motivator to see that you're on track for the day, or doing the quick version of the raw reset just to find what needs your most attention today. Is it your energy that's struggling? Is it your focus? Whatever that is. You don't get a lot, but you get a little bit. You get a little mantra and a little activity to do just to try and correct that vibe a little bit. And then we've got our actual communities, whether it's the Healing Hearts community, which is more about dealing with a death, or Grief Wisdom Circle, which deals with everything other than a death loss, or the Strength Wisdom Circle, which is more of a virtual coaching. It's 4 days a week of content, mantras, somatic exercises, breath work, stretches, mantras, a lot of saying things out loud, repetitive, very empowering. Whenever I'm having a challenging time, I go back and replay them because they help me a lot. And then we've got our skills lab, which delves into all kinds of different therapy techniques. And I say techniques because I take what I learned through my master's degree and my coaching certificate that I also got through the same college, university. And I put a naked grief spin on it because otherwise it's just like everybody else. So if you've ever felt like your wind was stolen or that you're constantly missing the endings of your own life stories, you're not alone. We're here to help you peel back the layers of those unrecognized losses. Make sure to join us for our next episode where we deal with bullies and more big book of names drama. Until then, stop future casting your life and start holding space for your present. That's the power of cinema therapy. This show gives us permission to feel the feelings we've been told to skip. So next time a movie or a Friends episode hits you in the chest, don't fast forward. Stay and feel. That's where the healing starts. For more resources on navigating the losses no one talks about, head over to thenakedgrief.com. Check out our full library of deep dives on our YouTube channel, at The Naked Grief, and see how we're mapping out the world of disenfranchised grief. See you soon. Take care and have a great weekend. Da 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 da.